Counseling Psychology, and this is Unit 5. As we discuss the psychodynamic approach, we are now going to head towards another approaches of counseling psychology, which deals with a completely different ideology of counseling people. This is called the existential and humanism. We already had an introduction of this. Today we will go to the other aspects of existential and humanistic approach. What all this will comprise would be structural learning objectives as per the index, the existential therapy, the role of the counselor, techniques and strategies, evaluation. Also, the person centered therapy will also be discussed here, and the role of counselors equally, the techniques, and we are going to evaluate how the technique is. Now, let's move on ahead. As speaking about the existential therapy, the view of human nature according to existential therapy was that human experiences anxiety. When do we experience anxiety according to existential therapy or existential approach? When there is a lack of meaning making, there is a lack of knowing who you are as a self, when you do not understand what is your purpose and goal as a self, that results in something called as existential anxiety. This is very different from something a psychologist and psychotherapist of psychodynamics stated. They stated that we experience anxiety because we are in conflict with our unconscious wishes and desires. Here we are in conflict with our own authentic self, which we haven't reached to in terms of the purpose, in terms of meaningfulness, and we are suffering in loss, pain, any meaninglessness feeling. You have an anxiety, you have sufferings of understanding yourself. So also another aspect which was touched by existential approach, because it is a very philosophical approach, it did speak of life, it did speak of death, and mention that death is inevitable. You cannot be avoiding it. Awareness of it is inevitable makes life significant. That's the cycle of life according to existential approach. That we live, find purpose. If we are not able to find a purpose, we will have suffering, we will have pain, we will feel meaninglessness, and that is what is going to create an existential anxiety, making us feel insignificant. And acknowledging the impermanence of life can serve as a motivation, also can act as a very wake up call to us to enjoy the beauty of the present. So this is what the essence of view of human nature according to the existential therapy. Now let's understand what is the goal of existential therapy. It's so philosophical. What does it find? Embrace their authentic self, obviously, which is obviously becoming aware of who you are and all your purposes of life, re-owning your authenticity. So I'll just give an example. When we find a very faded picture and we are not able to locate what the person looks like, and similarly, when you experience yourself as faded and you are not able to see yourself clearly, is lacking authenticity of self. And that is what existential approach will make you reclaim yourself authentically. Another goal that they help you achieve is being fully present in the here and now, understanding your relationship, taking charge and taking responsibility of your actions, and obviously broadening your perspective of looking at themselves, which is apart from the kind of perspective that they hold about themselves. We try to broaden their aspect of seeing themselves, being in the here and now, understanding and motivating themselves to be present right now. Also, this allows them to live in the present and not be dragged in the past. Another goal of existential is very varied. The kind of the therapy that you are going through or putting out is the kind of goal that you experience. So it's a greater acceptance of self, you greater acceptance of people, greater acceptance of situation, becoming more aware, exercising your own choice, exercising your own freedom, exercising your own responsibility. So did you realize there are varied goals that can be achieved as per the context and situation that you're a part of? Then this is what existential looks like, getting inside your own mind and seeking awareness about yourself. That's what the image tries to tell us about. Then let's understand the role of counselors. Knowing that this is a very different therapy, knowing that this therapy usually states the fact that we are going to achieve something which is within you, provide you purpose, provide you authenticity. So how does the counselor, and what kind of a role does and responsibility does the counselor hold? Do they solve every problem for you? Do they provide you everything? Like in the psychodynamic approach was the expert person, right? So if you have a psychotherapy given by Sigmund Freud, You get the ready-made answer. You get the ready-made, a platter which is complete and a platter that holds all the answers. But here, when we speak about the role of the counselor in existential therapies, understanding the subjective world of the client is first very primary to them. So, which is understanding what is held by the client, what is their immediate understanding of themselves. So, which is the primary self is understood of the client. They do not, adopt a very objective approach, which is we don't keep concluding this is what the client is, this is what the client is. We don't do that. We're very open. We are flexible. Also, we do adapt a very detached stance because we cannot be attached to the client. Rather, we have to be caring and intimate in relationship with the client. So we are detached so that we hold the authenticity as counselor in existential therapy. But at the same time, we are detached and we are not going to be attached to their problem. Neither their problem and neither the client, nor the client. Then another way that they hold up to situation is blaming other or the situation is never an option. So we tell the client to take responsibility both of the situation and themselves. We never say that, okay, if you missed something, you will blame somebody else for that or blame the situation. We do not allow a very situational attribution here. We allow attribution, which is attribution is, the causes behind your behavior is usually taken up by you. Also, the client does not, the client does blame others for life condition. This is a human tendency. Whenever we are going through a problem, whenever we are going through a difficult condition, we tend to blame, and we most often blame people and others around us. So this is something which is extremely discouraged by the client. We usually promote them and allow and motivate them to contribute in their problem situation rather than distribute the problem situation to other people. Then the counselor invites client to become more self-aware, for also obviously because of the fact that awareness is the key. So we are always inviting question which is putting a mirror in front of them time and again and helping them understand what their life conditions are. They need to take up the responsibility and live life responsibly. Also, the journey is very unique. Like any other psychotherapy, existential therapies are also very unique and creative. The reason that we use the word creative is because here we are very flexible. We do not go to the most simplest way of blaming other people. We tell them to explore, we tell them to innovate, we tell them to dwell into themselves and have an understanding of the real world in a new perspective. So that is innovation. Then let's understand what is the client's experience in this therapy. So when speaking of existential therapy, knowing it's so philosophical, knowing that Viktor Frankl, we all know all the pioneer of existential therapy went through a major life crisis. And that's why, the therapy comprises of the cycle of vicious cycle of life problems, solving them, coming back to death, life problem, like that. So this concept came up because of the fact that all the three pioneers, including Viktor Frankl, who gave the major contribution, went through a greater deal of crisis that they had to solve, and that's where the purpose, the existence as a terminology came up to everyone's mind, and that's the reason this therapy does not talk about blaming other people and taking onus of your onus of your life and responsibility and freedom to choose whatever that you like. Now, understanding that what is the core and crux of existential approach, what are its goals, what's the role of the counselor, let's understand what the client will experience in the therapy. The client in the existential therapy plays a very active role. The reason, the therapist acts as a facilitator. We are not acting as an expert. We do not provide them everything made up on the platter and tell them to eat. No, we provide them the plate and tell them to organize their platter and eat it themselves. So we are here, we are not the expert. The reason that they play an active role is that in the process of reflection and exploration of the world, the client understands the various shade of themselves, understands the various behaviors, the various emotions of happiness, sadness, joy, obviously at times anger. All of this is experienced and understood by themselves. So this is increasingly making them aware of themselves. Also, hence, at times, might provide them a taste of existential freedom. So everything relies on the client. He has to play the active role to choose, pick, adapt, and move to the next stage. And speaking about what kind of techniques will the therapist or the counselor utilize here, Viktor Frankl stated that as a leader of the existential therapist, he stated that he emphasized a therapy which is called the soul therapy, which is called the logotherapy. It emphasizes on finding the meaning of life. Logo is soul and therapy is treatment, so it was the treatment of the soul. So he who stated has why to live can bear with almost anyhow. So which is true. So see this, what does this terminology on the screen suggest? Anyone who has the why of the living. So if you know why do you want to live, will always make a way through. People who do not have the why realize what's the why here, the purpose, the meaning, the existence. So once you do not have your existence, you do not understand why are you living, what are your goals for living, you will obviously not find ways to live for that life. This goes for everything. Remember the kind of relationship that you're a part of, the work profile that you're into. If you do not know why are you working, some people have goals to achieve something bigger, some people have goals to sustain their families, some people have goals to achieve just their creative self. It's not about the income. At times some people wants to achieve it just for a standard of living. So when we speak about all of this, remember the why is very clear, so they will always find their way and work well in their workplace. But if you do not know why are you working, remember you'll always going to experience this, why should I do it, this is something I don't want to do. There are going to be a lot of crises, lot of existential issues at your workplace. So because you will never almost find a how. This was given by Viktor Frankl, a very, I feel, a very instrumental aspect of existential approach under his therapy, which was called logotherapy, therapy of the soul. It highlights the client's experiences and subjective world to find out the meaning in one's existence here in the world, which is obviously to help them understand their own subjective experiences and clients' experiences. Another technique that we utilize here, in terms of techniques that we talk about is existential approach. Existential approach is not a very technique driven thing like other psychotherapists. Like when we'll come to cognitive and behavioral, especially behavioral, you will understand behavioral techniques are so many in number. Here we rather focuses on subjective experiences, exploration, uh, elaborate exploration of the world, unique ways of understanding their life, focusing on not especially on diagnosis or planning intervention or giving them a therapy. It's more about being able to understand yourself in a beautiful way, in a more subjective manner, and I would rather say in a more philosophical term, knowing why do you exist, for what do you exist, and why do you want to go on. So it's like a fellow traveler, philosophical companion. Subjective realities, we try to help them support their subjective realities. That what is your reality giving you, and for what are you dealing with it. So that comprises of one technique. Then one other key point here is to remember we need to be very responsive, very emotionally and therapy wise being responsive to the client, which is the relationship should be very central, between the counselor and the client. The client cannot take a back seat, and the counselor, because he is not an expert and a facilitator, can also not take a back seat. So here your counselor cannot just sit back and talk about the fact that the reason that I am not the center, I am not the expert, I will let you be. No. The key is being responsive. The key is being able to understand the problem and help them explore further. The kind of questioning that is done to the client is also very important by the therapist or the counselor. So they are not passive counselors here. They're equally active, but more active are the clients here. Then moving the kind of relationship these people hold. As we all know, that the relationship which most of the therapists should hold is authentic, so is existential therapies are promising us. They give the central prominence of their relationship with the client. It has to be very authentic, very unique. The encounter between them should be like the I and the though, which is I and you. And there need to be a true, genuine dialogue between the two people. The interaction needs to be very direct. We don't need to talk between the lines. We need to be very clear, very authentic, unique, and sense of clarity as a counselor. We should know if you're using something which is client centered therapy, the role and responsibility of finding their problem needs to be of the client. But you need to help them explore. Like, you always remember the fellow traveler for whom you're just traveling along and holding the light for them. and they are traveling, they are walking. The task is harder task is they are walking, finding their way. You are just throwing light from above, or probably a, a jet plane above them, which is throwing light on their path. But who's doing the walking? It's there. So the contribution remains equal, but it's considered as more clear, more unique, more authentic, and something which is of equal division, which is I and thou. Another thing, it's a mutual journey of self discovery for the counselor and the client both. So let's do the evaluation. Understanding that this therapy is really philosophical, yes. At times it's very difficult to apply it in many areas. So let's evaluate how good this therapy is and what is its critical analysis. How will we analyze this therapy if we speak of it? So existential therapy, yes, can be integrated in wide variety of therapies. So you can include a little bit of essence of existential therapy with CBT, with BT. You can even include it with, I feel, psychodynamic. I would not be very sure about that, but I feel we can include it with psychodynamic equally, where we need to be a little I and though in terms of relationship, etc. Also, it is argued that the relationship here is towards more like a positive psychology, we are helping them evolve positively, helping them affirm that the affinity towards authenticity, subjective experiences, personal growth, the agency towards responsibility, meaning of life is far more. And our major agenda is to help them explore towards personal growth. So these therapies can be used where people failing, having existential crisis. It can also be used with substance abuse very easily. It could be used with people with the diverse population because existence as a problem is very common to all. Racial minorities, it could be used with homosexual concerns. We can use it with psychiatric patients also, but not of a griever concern. We probably cannot go with a schizophrenic dealing with an existential approach because they're already living in a virtual world. We probably will not be able to solve that problem. Another thing we need to know, this therapy has been highly criticized because it does not lack any system, does not have any organized principles, does not have much techniques. It's very influential and very motivating, but it cannot deal with greater issues of life, which is at times where need to be very driven, very activity oriented. This therapy does not work. Another major drawback is the amount of maturity and experience and training that the practitioner needs is of a great deal. Not everybody can deal with that process of, I feel, that maturity of what do you call this? We Not every psychologist will come with that thought process of meaning making, helping you understand your existence, helping you develop that human ideology about your life, the process of why did you come to life, what is the purpose of your life. Not every psychologist will have that great deal of maturity and that great deal of experience. So finding the right fit here as counselors is also a tough task, and not everyone can take that role and give you a successful therapy. Also, some regard existential therapy to be very individual centric, and as discounting on the social factors in shaping human concerns, which is, I feel true about it. When we're dealing with the crisis of people, dealing with their life problems, their motivational issues, their failures in life, we need to put the social construct between, because people fail in reason to how society tell them to work and they're not able to, or their work areas tell them to work. So that's the society, that's the social factors of completing something which is being given in the kind of ways, in the way of propaganda that the workplace has. But not everyone is able to do that. Some person has more creative ways of telling and doing that or experiencing that. So are we discounting the social factors? Do we tell that humans are not social beings? So if we are dealing with people through this therapy, way too philosophical, is very personal also. We are dealing with their problems as per them. We are dealing with the soul therapy. The logotherapy talks about their soul, and it's restricted to the person, how the person takes responsibility of their problems and about themselves. So I feel this is something a little individual centric, where we do not consider the social environmental factors into play. And I feel we cannot discount the social factors. We are all social beings, and that's what drives us in society. So this is what is the evaluation of the existential therapy. Stated that it can be blended with a lot of therapy, but probably not is for all the problems. Also, at the same time, it lacks structure, lacks a lot of principles and techniques, mostly very widely influential, yet is officially not embraced as approaches. So while treating with people, existential therapy might not be used as a separate approach. We might put it along with something else. So that finishes with the logotherapy and the evaluation of logotherapy in existential. So let's just talk a little about understanding what are the dimensions of existential therapy at the last. See, with the motivation that people are suffering from existential crisis, understanding that they don't know why they feel alienated, why they do not have a purpose of life, which is the major component of this therapy, which limits our existence, I feel. As soon as you do not know what you're here for and what your life is giving you and what is the reason that you're here in life for, you do feel lost. And I feel a lot of times people are committing um, a lot of heinous crimes and sin is because they do not know what's the purpose of life. So to know the brighter side of life, which is courage, hope, liveliness, we also need to know the anxiety, the darker part of life. This is what they mention. Also, this approach recognizes the inquisitive nature of human approach, which is the responsible, the creative way of humans. Also, there are some dimensions which are given by existential, which is some dimensions what is a part of human nature. Human nature needs to be self-aware. That is, they all are very unique to one another. Everyone holds the capacity of being self-aware. Everyone holds the capacity to lead a very freedomful life, a freedom to choose what they want to, a choice of their own responsibility. Choice and responsibility again, which is human beings are master of their own destiny. You choose to. I always feel whatever decisions that we take in life has a consequence. So we need to decide very thoughtfully and very responsibly. Why? Because we will end up living with the consequence of that decision. So ideally, we are the master of our own destiny, which is very correct by human as existential approach. The third dimension is humans are basic, their basic need is to maintain their uniqueness, their individuality, be away from the others, have their own set of structure as their identity. So, which is true relationally and socially both. Also, it's an ongoing process. Existentialism is an ongoing process where we find purpose, values, we get stuck, achieve goals, again find purpose, values, get stuck, achieve goals. So where we do experience meaninglessness, we do experience emptiness, and then we create a new life with our choice, and the meaningfulness and the purpose is achieved. So, self-awareness, the choice, our basic need to maintain our uniqueness, it's being an ongoing process as such. That completes with something which was stated as the existential approaches dimensions. Now let's move to person-centric approach. Person-centered approach was something which was largely given by Carl Rogers in 1940s, and the person-centered approach, like the term suggests, it's the client-centered approach. The client is at the center. The client is somewhere we focuses everything, and the person-centered approach uses a very phenomenological approach. Again, very what do you call that? Something which has phenomena and logic both. So something which has philosophy and logic both residing together. The focus is here is on the experiences of the person that you're treating or you're supporting or helping. How does that person experiences the world and the things around himself? So that's where our question mark comes in. Now, what is the view of person-centered approach about human nature? So PCT, which is person-centered therapy, said that its fundamental roots lies in the belief that each human is rational and worthy. So that means inherently we know that we what is the right for us and what is worthy for us. So this is a human nature which PCT stated, which is person-centered therapy stated, that the fundamental belief is that they believe that humans know their worth and humans are very rational in their approach to life. Also, PCT believes that people try to work towards becoming the best version of themselves. So this is inherently, inbuilt in us. I always experience this in our lives. We achieve one goal, we move to the next. We finish the next goal, we move to the next. So what are we doing? We are achieving one after the other, which as goals, as work, a task that we have proposed in front of ourselves. So what is very common? Common is that we're always working towards achievement, working towards something, the best version of ourselves. So also as opposed to working towards reducing their ill bits like defenses and distortion. So we are equally moving towards understanding ourselves in terms of what is bad about ourselves and what is good about ourselves. Rogers also believed, Carl Rogers, that each individual not only had the potential to actualize, but also understand their inner voice. So, here comes that major terminology of humanistic approach, which was self actualization. According to Carl Rogers, we all are moving towards self actualization, which is we we always look forward to achieve the next best for ourselves. So this is something which is also called as the organismic valuing processing that we have. This is what person centered approach look like, and we deal with, which is, yeah, we deal with school, lifestyle, the loved ones, the work, and the health issues very focusedly. Although all of those experiences which deals with us, all of those experiences that talks about providing, helping us actualize at workplace, lifestyle. Also nowadays people are getting working towards making their lifestyle better, because lifestyle is also becoming like a disease. We need to improve that, we need to make sure that it works well. So this is the way the human nature is sought out and seen according to PCD. Another key approach, which I stated, self actualization. Self actualization is the driving force of Carl Rogers' thought process, also, which is they feel that actualization is the highest point that we all want to achieve, which also influences the way we behave with people, the way we emote with people. And another major focus of Carl Rogers was self. His entire theory was built around the understanding of self that we will now understand, and finding the meaning, understanding what the self comprises of. And he mentioned this theory is as self theory. Now let's understand, according to Carl Rogers, why did psychological distress come to us? So, what was the reason that we experienced something which was psychological distress? Any kind of disease, any kind of problems? The reason, according to Carl Rogers, lied under the concept of his self theory. He gave us a very beautiful understanding that, within our real experiences, we differentiate ourselves to be in two ways. So there is a self which is the real self. The real self is the self which is the actualizing self. The real self is your real one. How do you actually feel? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? How do you want to regard people? How do you regard yourself? How do you view yourself? That's how you feel, which is your real aspect. And then there's another self, which is stated as the self, which is the concept self, which is considered as the ideal self. Why it is called the concept self? This is how you strive to be. This is what you want to become. This is what you are achieving to become. So this use terms like ambition, striving, self-worth. So this is how your expectations are, that this is what I want to look like at a time, and this is who I am. So the entire psychological distress was through the interaction of the two. The self concept influenced by the society and its expectations from the individual. And remember, there are going to be gaps between your real and ideal self. Who you are and what you want to be will always have gaps. Remember, it's very difficult to be very equivalent. This is what I am and this is what I want to be. It gets very difficult. Remember, the biggest of business holders of our country, Ratan Tata, even Ambani's, they are striving every day for a bigger thing. Remember, their real self is also not equivalent to the ideal self. There's a gap between the two. They are, thinkers every day. Now, when the gap is a lot and the overlapping between the real and the ideal self is very less, remember, there comes incongruency. Incongruency is, a feeling where a state of overlap between the real and the ideal self is less, which is what you feel about yourself, and what you want to become is very less. So what is the problem here? Your ideal self does not really fulfill your real self criterias, which means you are not. I'll give you a simple example. When children talk about the fact that we want to be entrepreneurs in the next 5 years, great. That's like an ideal self. Want to be, building up people, giving employment to the hundreds of people, and this is my idea, etc. This is their striving, the ambition, and the worth that they carry. What is their real self? Actualizing the potential. What are they doing for it? Nothing. Do they have a business plan? No. Do they have finances? No. Do they have sponsors for their work? No. So, did you realize they just have an idea in the beginning? They don't have a self regard of what they have done, and actualizing potential is completely missing. don't you feel there's going to be a very less overlap between the two? There's going to be very less, similarity between the real and the ideal self. It's going to be very tough. So when an individual in the society experiences congruence, remember they feel negative about themselves, they feel defeated, they experience dissatisfaction, unhappiness. So when an individual in society is fed with the notion of what she should be and how she should act and how she should develop, that leads to the development of learned conscious self. So such a learned conscious self will never develop a I feel will never develop an ideal self. This learned conscious self is completely based on expectations of what the society is given. Remember what's going to be a congruent self, a happy, satisfied self, when the real self is completely, not completely, but largely overlapping your ideal self, which is your self, which is the real experiences are overlapping your concept self. Give you an example. Let's take the same example. The person who wants to be an entrepreneur and is looking forward to it. So what is that person doing? That person is working hard, making a business plan, made two different business plans, looking forward to sponsors, looking for the pitfalls of that business, what can go wrong, looking for small short term finances which can be used in the beginning, and looking for young and youngsters for employment. So what are you doing? Your real experience are equivalent to your ideal self. Your self-worth is matching your actualizing potential. So the congruency is going to be high. You're going to be satisfied. There's going to be a state of happiness and contentment. So remember, the goal of usually this therapy, when we talk about, is achievement of the congruence in individual. And remember, for the learned conscious self, the goal of that is to be society-based actualization, which is learn conscious self as per another conscious self state, work as per the society. So people who are doing everything and getting validated, by the society are the society-based actualization. That's actualization is not self, but society-based. So these are the two kind of concept that we spoke about that leads to psychological distress, because society-based actualization can give a lot of distress, a lot of pain in the mind. It can never make you reach your goals, but make you reach goals which society wants. So this completes the causes. Now let's move to the goals of person-centered therapy. Person-centered therapy is talked about exploring all aspects of your being, understanding yourself in depthly. Also, decreasing the level of incongruence. We try to make sure that you do not experience a bigger diff between the real and the ideal self. So your real self should start working. So your first goal for the person-centered therapy is to decrease the incongruence, which will further automatically decrease something which is called the distress in the therapy. Also, the first step to help the client is to move towards to lessen the distress. The therapy opens up with the same thought process and getting in touch with the person's organismic valuing process, which is achievement, the same process, actualization, finding meaninglessness, then achieving actualization. So, according to Rogers, described the organismic value that was existential. According to him, organismic value is something which is an innate approach. We all look forward to achieve a goal, find another goal, strive towards it, then achieve it. So, see, according to person centered, here there is no meaning making or meaninglessness that you experience. Here, there's self actualization for which we keep striving, achieve congruence in congruence, keep striving, achieving congruence in congruence, leading to more fulfilling life in your world. So striving for actualization is the main purpose of the therapy, which is very true. Actualization is reaching towards your highest potential. So which is actualizing towards your goal. So self-actualization, when a person completely realizes her potential and reaches towards its fullest of ability, is called the self-actualization and reaching towards this. Another thing is becoming a fully functioning person is another goal where you're able to experience congruence. You know your organismic value, you are aiming for actualization. So it's a combination of all the goals of PCT. And moving ahead, it's the role of the counselor. Now let's understand, the role of the existential approach was something where we talked about they will distance themselves, they look towards authenticity. It did lack a lot of structure. But, Carl Rogers did mention this, that my therapy is a combination of scientific rigor, which is theories that he has written, which is the theoretical approach, and a lot of application of that approach on people. So his theory was both theoretical and practically applied to people. So it did not lose that scientific thought process and the scientific rigor, unlike the existential approach. But it was here the role of the counselor was a little non-directive. We were not very directive. We did not have questions like, "Why did you do this? How did it happen to you?" We don't pose questions like that. We pose questions which are non-probing, non-harming to the person. So it's a little non-directive counseling, where the counselor's function is to provide therapy, where the person can be learned, imitated, but not, but the one that has to be experienced. We play a role of an empathetic listener, more of an empathetic listener, where we have the ability to help them tell and make them realize that you can have faith in us. We will help you support through your ability to reach yourself. So it's you who will reach yourself, but here we are non-directively pushing you, motivating you, making you learn and imitate things and understand yourself as a learned individual. So here we are more like an empathetic listener, understanding your problems like being in your shoe, but not solving the problem for you. Also, it is the belief and the attitude that the counselor has the role, his counselor that has the shape his in terms of the fact that the attitude and belief of the counselor has the role of the therapist, not very set techniques. Again, here it is mostly dependent upon the kind of belief and attitude you hold towards your client. So it has to be again very authentic. There are no more techniques here. We are neither the expert not a teacher. So you're neither the expert and not a teacher to your client. That means you are just an empathetic listener, a role of a facilitator again. You do not tell them that this is how you need to do. Neither you sit back and just keep suggesting their pathways. No. Neither we solve the entire problem to them, nor do we give them everything done like a teacher, like spoon feed them like a teacher. We help our attitude, our belief systems, help them shape their world, motivate them their world about. Another role, like a role that we have, see, therapist attitude is of primacy. Primacy means the way we, deal with our client is of utmost importance. You need to give respect to your client. Unconditional positive regard is such an important factor. Non-judgmental attitude, accepting whatever that comes from the client, respect, showing a lot of care, being very genuine and authentic, not lying to the client, not faking your empathetic listening, making sure that your attitude is filled with unconditional positive regard and non-judgmental attitude. You cannot talk about and say your client that, okay, you do not have a purpose. How can you not have a purpose? We do not question like that. This is something which is very threatening to the client. That's the reason the therapy is non-directive counseling. We never pose them questions which makes them feel that we are wrong in society. We rather ask them, how did you feel that you would reach to this problem? I understand the problem that you're going through is massive. So this is empathetic listening that you have done. So understanding that such problems, yes, do come to people and you are going through. So respect, dignity, integrity of you and your client, unconditional positive regard, not judging your client, being very authentic and genuine is extremely important. Extreme care needs to be taken of that. Also, the last, the aim here is to facilitate, not direct the client. As I said even before, you are holding the light for your client to walk on the path. You will not take steps for him in the beginning and clear the path and tell them that this is how you need to walk. So we are not going to spoon feed them. We help them to be open towards exploration and tell them that this is how you need to be. We do not do all of this. We rather facilitate them, show them light, do not spoon feed them. Rather tell them this is your path. You walk us and tell us how it becomes for you. So you find your own things, explore yourself, know your questions and know your answers. This is the way the role of the counselor is submitted in the therapy of person-centered therapy. It's also defined as a client-centered therapy equally. Now, coming to the client's experiences, again, very important it is. Speaking of client, when we understand that what do we know about the therapist, we need to understand what is the client doing here. What is the client doing here in the PCT? The client's experience and the counselor's attitude determine the degree of therapeutic change. So remember, the client's experience are of paramount here. So when we talk about it being paramount, that suggests that your client should be experiencing a lot of, an attitude of change, should look forward towards the therapy, should know that, yes, there is a change and I want to actualize. This is the attitude of the counselor. Now, degree of change in success also is determined by the client. Remember your client coming to you, coming with an attitude, oh, my life is not working, I will not be able to find what I want to. So remember, they will work towards a learned conscious self, not an ideal self. They will not work towards an ideal self. They will rather work towards a a society based expectation which is being validated, which will later cause them a problem. So when a therapist provides a suitable environment, the client should feel, that will make the client feel safe, respected. And that's when, when they come to the your therapy and they feel safe and they feel self-explored, that's the way that their attitude might change. They feel that I am responsible for change and explore myself. So that's one. Then the client should begin looking for all aspects of life. Remember, they should have a perspective thinking, know all their experiences, should be true. I feel the counselor should be able to support the client, make them feel that I am going to be there for you as a listener. That's how the client feels the responsibility of strengthening themselves and taking the responsibility of freedom to expand their areas of exploration. So the client should come with the idea that I'm coming to the therapy to explore more, to understand myself more. So, and to decrease the degree increase the degree of engagement of myself into me. So a lot of quality self disclosure happens by the client, a volume of this self disclosure, which is all the problems, the reason why the problems are coming into play, what has led to that self conscious feeling. So they should come with the ideology of expanding their horizon to think about themselves. So the awareness should come in properly, not the way that the awareness should come through the client. The client, the therapist. The therapist will not give you any awareness. The therapist will just give you the platform to explore. So, how should be the client's experience? The client experience should be open, flexible, should come to the therapy with a reason of change. That I am coming to the therapy, I want this change. I want to be changing myself. Then the next is that you need to know, the client should come with the factor that I'm responsible for the change and increase my degree of horizon and engagement about myself. They should be open towards the therapist to disclose a little quality disclosure and volume disclosure. So if they're showing resistance, not talking in the therapy, that something will not lead to success. Then let's come to techniques for the tools. PCT again does not come with techniques, but a lot of attitude and belief, as we decided. Genuineness and congruence should be the therapist's attitude, which is the therapist should be very honest, congruent in terms of what they experience is how they should put their feelings out. Counselor must be real self during the session. They should not be acting as their ideal self. They don't want to hold up any congruency here. Also, genuinity and authenticity, no fakeness. Your personal experience already are not disclosed. The client should have real thoughts about the matter of the problem. They should not have two idealistic situations, because that will that will confuse our client. Positive regard is regarding your client as what do you call this, regarding your client unconditionally. You never say that you do me this, only then I will support you. There are no conditions in your regard. You can always look forward to something which is associated to uh, something which is associated to what do you call this, regarding people without condition, which is you come to the therapy tomorrow and I will be solving your problem. We never give them regards like that. You never tell them that their experience are validated, only then you will look forward to it. So remember, when we talk about client-centered therapies, unconditional positive regard also gets into this factor of non-judgmental thinking from our sides. When you therapy providing to people, and people tell you the griever of problems and the ugliest of problem, what do? This is not acceptable. You change your mind process and then we'll begin ahead. What are you doing? You providing condition that I am going to respect you only when you change your mind. This is conditional regard. Not even regard, this is conditional acceptance. Not something that we should practice. Then we come to empathetic understanding, extremely important. Please understand the client's feeling as being in their shoe. Try be very genuine and very authentic, which is extremely important. Now, let's understand this why empathy, positive regard, and genuineness so important. Remember, all of this leads to a vision in the client. It leads to the desire to change in the client. Acceptance happens, very commonly stated. Acceptance happens. There is a clear intention that happens, and with all of this, a pure actualizing action will take place. So this is something which empathy, positive regard, and genuineness will give. Now let's come to three conditions that pertain to client and counselor's relationship, which is what are the three things that should always be there between these relationship, which is of the client and the counselor. Speaking of this, the client counselor congruency, which is client incongruence. The client incongruence is indifference between the real and the ideal self. If this is not there, remember, if the client is completely integrate, very confident, they come to the therapy. So when there is no incongruence, you probably the therapy will not go in any direction. What are we motivating them for? We do not have any pinpoint. We do not have a problem. I would rather say we do not have incongruency and dissatisfaction and discontentment that we explore on. There is no exploration needed. These people will not self-disclose or indulge because they already are congruent. So there needs to be a client incongruence. Also, client counselor relationship, which suggests that the client and the counselors in a psychological should be in a psychological contract of limited duration. The agreement should the agreement with the fact that the client will be devoted to growth while the counselor offer unconditional regard, facilitate the journey. That's how they should come up with. The both should have the qualities which is required. I always feel we in client counselor relationship we all are puzzle pieces. So one puzzle needs to be a part of the other. If it's not, if you are not distressed, what kind of regard will we provide you? We can just motivate you a little and send you off, which I feel is of not something which is the aim of any therapy. So is for person-centered therapy first, the client needs to have an incongruence. There should be a buffering relationship between a client and the counselor, which is they should be in contract, in agreement that they're voluntarily coming to offer unconditional positive regard and the other is coming to get their problem solved. Then the third is the client's perception. The client should be able to foresee the counselor's, not foresee, rather, is able to experience the your counselor's unconditional positive regard and empathy, because I feel if you are not able to experience that empathy, that acceptance, that unconditional regard and non-judgmental attitude, the therapy does not go to any extent. All of this thing, the empathy, the unconditional positive regard adds up to the client counselor relationship and strengthen it a lot, so that the client is able to unburden himself. So if you do not have that unburdening, remember the therapy session itself is a fail. It does not work through. So these are three important, pertaining factors for the PCT, which is person-centered therapy. Now let's move to a little bit of evaluation. As evaluating all, person-centered therapy, as the term suggests, was also stated as the client-centered therapy, where we put forth the client in the beginning, like client in the center. So the therapy shifted the scope and the culture of the of culture therapy a lot. In this approach, it empowered the clients a lot. So here we look forward to take away a little strength from the therapist, but give a lot of strength to the counselors. Sorry, to the clients. So here the role of the client is far more empowering and far more impressioning than the counselor, because the role of the client himself is to find his journey, explore, be flexible, be innovative, actualize, keep actualizing, achieve their actualization, and again get back to something which is the regular course of living. So when we speak about this, remember they are far more empowering. There is a demystified therapeutic techniques by moving away from the technical jargon, which is very true. Speaking of this, I feel I should not be saying, but this therapy does not have much of technical jargons. You don't have something which is very difficult, like transference, counter transference, resistance. That all of this is not used here. So it's a very simplistic technique which talks about helping you achieve your goal, giving you regard, not being judgmental to you. So there are no technical jargons also which are present here. Also, PCT is very suited for early phase of intervention. Person-centered therapy can be used with maximum psychological therapy in the beginning, so that we can neutralize the for milder problems, especially the people going through anxiety, lighter depression, going to failures in life. This kind of early intervention of PCT is very successful for those problems, which is milder problems and problems which are of moderate difficulty. It can be applied for individual setting. It can also be applied for group settings. These therapies can also be applied for group setting. Problems are alike, and problems like anxiety, alcoholism, psychosomatic problems, interpersonal difficulties like suicide, depression, personality disorders, and cancer healing. PCT is one of the kind of therapy. So, apart from existential, PCT is far more applicable than existential's logotherapy, and it's far more what do you call this? It's more changing, individual changing, exploration, actualizing, reaching towards your goal, making you more integrate. So that's another thing. Now let's come to some limitation, because all of them have some limitation, and we need to know that PCT does come with a little, because it does not have any sort of fixed techniques, but it has attitudes and belief, as I started. Empathy, genuineness, these are attitude. These are not techniques. We do not have techniques. Like when we move toward behavioral techniques, you will see functional techniques, action oriented techniques happening. Here we have nothing like that. We do not hold anything. So that's the biggest shortcoming. We do not take in consideration of learning also, and non-verbals are also not taken into consideration. There's an absenteeism of something which is called of social factors at times, and too much of regard and too much of unconditional regard. We are not able to consider the inheritable things. We are not able to consider learning and unlearning factors, the capacity of individuals. We do not consider the non-verbals. We do not consider if the individual is shy, is not able to do anything, then if their personality does not allow them to work. These are limitations, lesser limitation than existential therapy at per se. Person centered are far more used because it has far more application. And this completes with humanistic and existential today completely as an approach, which is yet very philosophical. Both of them are philosophical a little, very, I feel, very phenomenological also. Also looks forward to giving the charge to the client. So that completes with something which is humanistic and existential approach and the unified. Thank you.